Good evening and welcome to the Town of Sandwich Finance Committee meeting for February 10th, 2026. Tonight's meeting is being aired on Sandwich Community Television and will be available for replay. I am calling our meeting to order, so let's begin by rising for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you, and I would ask all of us to remember to turn on our microphones and speak clearly into it so those at home and those in the auditorium can hear us as well. I'd like to invite anyone from the public who may have some thoughts to share with us to come forth at this time. Anyone for public comment? Seeing none, next item is we do not have any minutes from last week's February 3rd's meeting, so we'll pick that up at a future meeting. On correspondence, statements, and announcements, over the next 2 weeks, I'll be working on the Finance Committee's town report that becomes a part of the overall town report. I'll forward last year's report to each of you and would ask that if you have any particular thoughts or points you'd like me to consider putting in for this year, to please pass those along. So does anyone else have any correspondence, statements, or announcements? Seeing none. Bud, why don't you lead us off with any updates you might have for us this evening?
Yeah, just some quick items. I just remind everyone, if you had any questions later on in the night, make sure you turn your mic on so it helps. So when Sue James does the minutes, she can hear them clear. So that would be great. Really nothing substantive to update on. We're still waiting on the same accounts that we highlighted in the presentation last week. We're still waiting on better information to come. So our hope is that our last meeting, the last week in February, we should have much of that in by then, and we can give you an update. But that's about it.
Very good. Tonight we gather really to discuss the fiscal 26 public schools budget. I'd like to welcome Dr. Marushak, his staff that's with us this evening, as well as members of the school committee that are with us. We're glad you're with us. Kevin Seralt, the chair of the school committee, reached out to me and said he would not be able to join us tonight, but wanted to let everybody know that he lends his support to the team that's with us tonight. Prior to tonight's Finance Committee meeting, the members received as a pre-read the school department's budget and presentation. Thank you for that. I also sent along some thoughts and questions surrounding finance and budget matters that the committee had come up with to Dr. Marushak, who was kind enough to provide a prompt response that was shared with all of the Finance Committee members. There was an additional question this afternoon that you'll be addressing as well, I know.
We have handouts.
Dr. Marushak, please go ahead, begin your presentation.
Thank you, Ed. Well, it's a pleasure to be here once again to share what we've put together for the proposed FY 2027 budget. I think a lot of thought has gone into this, and at the meeting, the last school committee meeting of January 28th, the school committee approved this proposed budget. So again, I think that this is a conservative budget, but it also moves our district forward in continuing forward momentum. So I have to give credit to one of our school committee subcommittees, the finance subcommittee. Each year when we start this cycle, and it seems to start really, really early, October-ish or so, they develop goals of what we want to achieve in the FY 27 budget. And it's really 4 simple goals. First and foremost, to provide a level services to keep the existing programming that meets our students' needs. Secondly, we had the opportunity last school year from January to June to develop a new 5-year strategic plan. As a matter of fact, Matt was part of a team of 38 parents, educators, students, community members that were involved in coming up with a vision to really, how do we improve outcomes for all students, and really how do we promote innovative practices? And I think our strategic plan really nails it, and I'll say a little bit more about that. Third, which has been a real emphasis, has been where can we address ongoing deferred maintenance, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Some targeted investments that we have that are in this budget that probably should be no surprise to any of you. And then last but not least, I consider this to be the perpetual goal of where do you find efficiencies, okay? Knowing that there's limited resources, and overwhelmingly the resources in our community come locally. They're not coming from state or federal sources. So where do we right size, and how do we balance those efficiencies to ensure that we're fiscally responsible? I have a high degree of comfort that all four of these goals are met through this proposed budget. So in putting together the budget, the very first thing obviously we look at is enrollment. Our official October 1st enrollment for this school year is 2,111 students. You see the breakdown by our three schools, Forestdale, Oak Ridge, and Sandwich Middle High School, and then OOD stands for out of district. Those are students who require specialized instruction due to significant needs. Therefore, they are tuitioned out. Are projected for next school year going on a lot of different metrics, but essentially we use an organization called NESDEC, which sends us enrollment projections a couple times a year. Should be pretty stable. Right now, a prediction of about 9 fewer students for next school year. If you look at what NESDEC sends us in this most recent report from December, they take a look at the historical enrollment in our district, and this would be our K through 12 enrollment. We all know about some of the rather dramatic drops in enrollment. However, a relative stabilization within the last 3 to 4 years. And then projecting out, they are projecting stabilization. Keep in mind, anything past 5 years, has different factors. Those first 5 years actually represent live birth data, and looking at mobility data for our community. So after 5 years, kind of looks at some different trends, but it does show stabilization. So what does that mean as far as our current levels of staffing and with enrollment? I'd say that we have class sizes that are very, very reasonable. Class sizes to meet the needs of students. What we'd like, a sequence that kind of moves progressively through the district, where you have early childhood, those early elementary grades. You want the smaller class sizes, so you see what the class sizes are at Forestdale. Then as students progress through upper elementary and then the middle school for, fairly larger class sizes, but again, they're still in very, very, in my opinion, reasonable ranges. Keep in mind, some districts that are struggling, it's not uncommon to see high 20s, low 30s. So I think we're extremely fortunate for what we have here. So in summary, the headlines for the FY27 budget proposal, it is a proposal for $42,205,431, a little bit more than $1 million increase, which represents a 2.60% overall increase from the current FY26 budget. It maintains level services and continues forward momentum towards really some of our key strategic plan priorities, thinking about that foundation of literacy and numeracy during the elementary grades, social emotional learning, or SEL, across all grades, and innovative practices that really kind of speak to deeper learning and students having meaningful learning experiences even outside of the classroom, particularly at the middle high school level. Staffing projects to be commensurate with enrollment, really right-sizing. One of your colleagues, Mr. Picard, was good enough to come on the 28th when we had budget forum and asked a ton of very thoughtful questions. Also made a couple suggestions, Jeff, which I've incorporated into the newest document. And he said, well, you know, how come I don't see the projected 26, 27 in your document? We actually put the staffing numbers, what we're projecting. This budget in total, there's some variations, is about a grand total of 6.0 FTEs fewer than the current FY26 budget. And then planned efficiencies will be reinvested in capital expenditures. I know over the last 2 years, I've talked about the flooring project at the elementary grades at Forestdale and Oak Ridge. And I know probably a little under 2 years ago, a lot of you that were on this committee did the tour of all 3 schools. We've made some significant progress, and I want to talk a little bit about the investment of some of those funds. So as far as the projected funding, really our 2 key sources are the Chapter 70 funding and then the local contribution. As far as Chapter 70, we learned on the last Wednesday of January, on January 28th, the House 1 budget, or Governor Healy's budget, has in Chapter 70 $75 per student additional over FY26. So that equates to $159,300 for our district. That's probably, as we go through the budget process, the most conservative number. Typically, the House and the Senate, as they're looking at revenue projections for FY27, will increase that. So I think that's a safe, conservative number to use. To get us to what we need as far as in this proposal, the local contribution increase is $911,655, which equates to a 2.76% increase over last fiscal year. So, as always, there's some key budget drivers that are driving this request. Obviously, the largest one is our personnel. We will be going into year 3 of our 3-year contracts with all of our collective bargaining associations, so teachers, educational support personnel, custodians, and admin assistants. The teachers are in line for a 3.25% COLA. For our other associations, generally in the range of about $1.50 to $2 per hour. The negotiations which we had in the summer of '24 were fairly reasonable, but we also were very, very cognizant, if you've followed this, particularly with our paraprofessionals, the whole idea of a living wage and looking at benchmarking where we were relative to the state, where we were relative to the region, and so on. So therefore, appropriate measures were made that were reasonable, but also got our people to where they needed to be. So in all sum total, including retirements, attrition through non-replacement of some retirements, we're looking at our overall salaries of about 3.21% increase. I'd say the second biggest driver is special education, the largest being the 214,523 in out-of-district tuitions. So that's a combination of 2 additional out-of-district tuitions plus the increase from state-approved programs, students that are in state-approved programs. Technology is always a fairly large driver, but for all intents and purposes, this is level funded. Our new technology director, Mike Falcone, has detailed an investment of approximately $100,000 to replace all of our wireless access points at Oak Ridge and the middle high school. He said, he started on the job the 1st of December, and he said, we've got to make this a priority, seeing that they are out of inventory. And I said, well, when are they out of inventory? And he said, Joe, today, December 1st, 2025. So we've had them in place for about 8 years, so that's a key investment. We continue the cycle every year, about $200,000 to replace Chromebooks at 3 benchmark grades, grades 3, grade 7, and grade 10, and they last for a period of 3 years. We've started to use a brand new kind of messaging app known as Parent Square to communicate with all of our families. It kind of integrates with our website, but people can also choose, do you want all of your communications via text message, via email? Plus, it does a really, really nice job with translation. So, investment of $14,000. However, that's kind of counterbalanced with finding some efficiencies, largely through some grant funding in various curriculum software and app licensing fees. Buildings and ground, really 2 big drivers here. We've got the 3rd year of an investment of $200,000 for the flooring project. When we got the news about the additional $159,000 in Chapter 70, we decided we should put that all in that line, in that purchase service line for facilities. So that's why you see the number 359,300. We have a high degree of confidence, and we discussed this at the last school committee meeting, that this will be the end. And I just want to show you, as I said at the school committee meeting, that is a picture on the left of the original carpeting that still exists in some classroom, okay? To be fair, I'm kind of dramatic. That occurred after the Forestdale sprinkler burst, and that classroom was looking real tough at the time. But you get a sense of, you know, that's what 30-plus-year-old carpet can look like. This is, the picture on the right is a classroom at Oak Ridge that you could see, you know, the luxury vinyl tile that we've done over more than half the classrooms at Oak Ridge and Forestdale. I know you also supported a capital request for new furniture, particularly at Oak Ridge. So you can kind of see the modular furniture that, you know, because of its geometric shapes, you can do all different types of configuration. It really encourages group work, collaboration, and so on. So your support really does make a world of difference. And, you know, sometimes I believe just 2 pictures can tell, you know, 1,000 words. So back to the drivers. Another big driver is our utilities. You know, probably maybe like your home bills, we're seeing some increases, particularly in electricity. You know, we really have a very big jump from at the middle high school, particularly in electricity. Part of it is an under budgeting for FY26, quite frankly, but some of it is looking at how the invoices are coming in for this year, so we need to plan for that, and so on. We also have an increase at Oak Ridge for the simple reason that last summer we had the HVAC project, and we're anticipating some additional usage due to air conditioning during the summer months. As far as transportation, that's always a major driver, but I know it's been reported in the local media, plus 2 school committee meetings ago, we had a discussion around the transportation efficiency study that was done this past fall. We got a lot of terrific data as far as how students are scheduled on buses, and then what is our actual ridership looks like. So we feel very comfortable going from a total fleet at the 3 schools of 19 buses down to 17, and kind of reconfiguring our routes and how they're scheduled. So that represents about $180,000 savings. It overall is about a $214,000 savings in looking at what we actually budgeted for FY26 versus what we're anticipating for FY27, because realize our bid did not come in until late March, early April for last year. And then there is a request in there, $65,000 for a brand new cargo van for our maintenance department. Realize they have been using retired special education vans, kind of reconfigured. Realize some of those vans have over 300,000 miles. So it's probably, for them, replacing one is long overdue. As far as our teaching and learning, it is a slight decrease, actually. And again, I have to give credit to our assistant superintendent, Dave Quinn, and our curriculum director, Jen Kirk, who are pretty aggressive in going after competitive grants to supplement costs of curriculum material, as a lot of it is online now. A lot of this has to do with app licensing fees. Athletics, that is also essentially level funded. We have a decrease of $20,000 from going back to the Cape and Islands League from the South Shore League. Pretty much universally, maybe with a couple exceptions, there's been tacit approval that it's good to be back in the Cape and Islands. So that also saves us on some transportation. Realize, I think, in the budget document, you will see, I thought it was really important to show the offset for FY27 and also years past, how much do we actually offset from the user fees that we take in from families and also gate receipts. And then level funded for the most part as far as district-wide expenses. However, we are in year 2 of I believe, is it 5-year or 5-year lease agreement. So a fairly significant hike there, and I think we have to dig a little deeper with regard to taking a look at some of our printing costs and kind of an appropriate balance between paper and printing versus digital. But those are our major drivers per our cost centers. I didn't talk about this after I showed the picture, but this came up at school committee, so I just thought I'd share this. We have a total of 90 classrooms at Oak Ridge and Forestdale. Right now, of those 90 classrooms, 50 have been replaced as far as their flooring. We will, next week during February break, be doing another 6. So that essentially leaves us with 34. Based upon the bids that we've received and kind of extrapolating that data, we have a very, very high degree of comfort that we will be able to complete that project at the very latest by spring break of next school year, so by April of '27. So if you look, this is kind of the bottom line, I believe, in the actual summary budget document on page 4 at the top shows the summary salaries in total, again, broken down by our cost centers, by our schools and our major cost centers, with an overall increase of 3.31%. And then our expenses are also in that table on page 4. Our overall expenses pretty level overall at 0.48%. And keep in mind, a big chunk of that is due to special education expenses. So I do want to say, you know, I've always, I can't believe that this is my 15th year as a superintendent, and something that I've always believed in, particularly when it comes time for budget season, you got to have a plan. You have to have a vision of what your district is all about and how you're spending the funds. So our new strategic plan, and I believe along with the select board, I believe shortly after it was approved, I mailed all of you a copy of it. It's called Learning and Leading, and I really think it's a powerful vision of what we want for all kids. And the plan has essentially 4 big rocks. First and foremost, you know, what are we doing with regard to curriculum and instruction, and how are we ensuring that we're aligning it with state standards so that all of our kids are on grade level and they're meeting the standards that they need? And how do we ensure that the instruction that every single child receives is of high quality? The second one really kind of speaks to what kind of supports are we putting in place for all kids? How are we meeting all kids' academic, behavioral, and social emotional needs? So that's really our second strategic objective. Our third one, which I think is really paramount, is climate and culture in school and community. So how are we ensuring that our students really have a sense of belonging internally within their school? Their families have that sense of belonging, but there's also clear connections with the community, okay? I'm struck every single day of how deeply invested people in this community are in their schools. I tell people, if I could have a quarter for every time I've spoken to a parent that said, yeah, I grew up here. We moved back here for the schools. Okay, I was working, we do a newsletter called Blue Night Highlights, and I was working on it this weekend, and I was doing a piece on our new school resource officer, Dan Halloran. He's a member of the Sandwich High School class of 2020. I was talking to Dan, I'm like, oh, that was the fun year. You enjoyed your graduation, didn't you? But I think, you know, and I think about how many people in public safety are a product of this community. The same's true with the schools. So there's a real connection and a real investment, and I think as a school district, we have to do everything in our power to really harness that connection and to harness the strength that we have within the community. And then the fourth big rock is, again, facilities and capital planning. As Matt could probably attest, when we had the full group sessions of 38 people during strategic planning, did that come up as a recurring theme? Maybe just a tiny bit. So it's really about funding, developing, implementing, and funding a comprehensive plan. At our meeting 2 weeks from tomorrow on February 25th, our facilities condition assessment, one that you so, in my humble opinion, wisely but generously authorized Habib and Associates to conduct, they will be presenting to the school committee the findings of the report, and then we will take it from there. But it's about, we've got this precious investment of these 3 schools. How do we extend that? And how do we ensure that it's a safe and effective learning environment? So those are really the 4 big rocks. Again, this is one budget. This is 1 year. But I think all of you around this table know this is not an easy year, okay? I got an email, I want to say it was right before Thanksgiving, from Bill talking about what we were potentially looking at as far as healthcare insurance. It's not good, but I have colleagues in southeastern Massachusetts and up and down the Cape that are looking at healthcare insurance increases of 25% plus. There's regional school districts that are budgeting 40%. So it's not a pretty picture. And every year, I think I kind of do this as therapy. Right when I'm developing the budget, I Google FY27, in this case, Massachusetts school district budget. And do you want to see some of the headlines that I got? And that one's local, okay? So, it's like the old Charlie Brown cartoon, like when you see somebody who's a lot worse off than you, you feel a little better. But in all seriousness, Bud says something frequently, particularly during town meetings, and I could not concur more. I do think that this town is very well run fiscally. It's been fiscally managed really well. I also have to credit my colleague, Michelle Austin, who's our Director of Finance and Operations. With everything that's going on out there, this is a good budget. And we are in a good place. Again, it's not everything in the world, but I have a high degree of comfort that we will continue to give high-quality programming and services to our kids. Because as our strategic plan says, these are really kind of the vision pieces of what we want for all of our students. We want them to have a strong sense of belonging. We want them to grow academically, grow socially, emotionally. We want to ensure that our students have multiple opportunities, and particularly around deeper learning, particularly around connections with the community, connections with the workforce. Of course, that is all premised on a solid foundation of literacy and numeracy, particularly during those early elementary years. But when push comes to shove, it's about connection. It's about connection amongst our staff and students, connection with our staff, students, and our families. And I'm very, very confident that this budget continues moving with forward momentum our district. So that's it. That's kind of the 10,000-foot view in a nutshell. I am more than happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Marushak and Michelle. I know you've put a lot of work into this budget as well, school committee members and the rest of the staff. Thank you for all the work put into the plans. But let's move forward with any questions or thoughts that Finance Committee members may have. Nancy?
Thank you for that. Some other 10,000-foot questions. Grants. When you look at the page about grants, they seem to be, they're up and they're down and they're up and down. How stable are those and how much can we depend on them, especially where they're funding positions?
That's a great question. Generally speaking, the grants that are on page 5 towards the top, they're known as the entitlement grants. Those are the ones that are administered through the state, but they come directly from the federal government. I think, Nancy, there is a little bit of concern, particularly with the dismantling of the Department of Education and so on. I think I think Michelle intentionally budgets a conservative number based upon that. There could be some variation, particularly with Title I funding based upon our poverty rates within the community. The competitive grants, there is variation with some of them. I remember it was a year ago, Bob asked me a question about a huge disparity, and it had to do with the CPPI grant, which is, as you can see, $1 million. That is a grant that is used to, for our pre-K program, but also for pre-K programs within the community. I mean, it's outstanding. At the time of my presentation last year, we had not heard on that, but we ended up finding we got the grant in May. So I think it comes down to who are the people that you have writing these grants, how good are they, and so on. You don't want your core program to be grant dependent. So a lot of these positions are kind of strategic add-on positions, if that answers your question.
It's just that, for instance, the Title I is less than half of what it was in the current year.
Yeah, because if you notice in the actual real numbers, it went for FY25 to 121, and then it went up to 215. The town of Sandwich is right at a threshold point of different gradients as far as poverty percentage, and we've changed literally by a percentage point a year in the measure of that.
I just want to follow up because I had a question on the grants as well, so let's stick with that. You mentioned and gave some thanks to some of the staff on the administrative side for work on grants, but that it didn't seem to be reflective, and I think it's to Nancy's question. So are there grants that just aren't noted in this list that you were thanking them for, that we don't see? And then I know you're adding to the administrative staff in central administration to take care of payroll, and I believe in the documents it mentions also for grant administration. So is there any expectation that with that added resource that, again, I understand we may have been conservative with this list, but is there an expectation that we'll see some additional grants received as a result of that added administrative position?
Yeah, that person will be able, it's an administrative assistant position, and that person will be able to help with the actual data upkeep and reporting associated with the grant, oftentimes competitive grants.
Nancy, did you have others?
Yes, and Michelle knows, I'm almost afraid to ask. When I first started, we had discussions on copiers ad nauseum, but I see that they're going up, and you touched on it.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that we would need a lot of copying for the little kids. It's more hands-on, but why is it going up so much in the other schools?
Do you want to do some walkthroughs at Forestdale and Oak Ridge with me, Nancy?
Sure.
You can do it. More than happy to. You'd be surprised in some cases. You might find some early elementary teachers who strongly believe that either screen time on a Chromebook is not appropriate for a 7-year-old, and I'm not going to fight that fight either.
I think you also might find that some elementary teachers feel kids need the kinetic skills of learning to write and penmanship and so on. So you do get that piece. I do think, honestly, there's some folks that may go a little bit overboard. You know, with this new system, we require everybody to use their badge to kind of log in to the copier/printer. So we do have an accounting of, you know, individuals and copy counts and so on.
And then another 10,000 square or 10,000 foot question is, what lies ahead that we need to be concerned about? I know you said the contract is coming up for next year, but any other big ticket items that we should be aware of?
I think the biggest thing is once we receive the facilities condition assessment, we need to kind of think strategically about what are the large ticket items that we, you know, need to address across all three schools. You know, we've got a sense, you know, we got great news, I think right when we came back from the holidays, where we put in a grant to the CPC to address the tennis courts at the middle high school. So that's going to be addressed. So we're delighted about that. But as you know, there's still at the middle high school things, you know, like the gymnasium floor that need to be addressed and so on. We have science labs at that middle high school that go back to the original 1976 construction. So, you know, we are going to have some big ticket items. I know the school committee's emphasis in my 4-year tenure now has been to try to address these facilities.
And now you just reminded me, the revolving accounts, the pool was set up as to be supportive of any future maintenance so that never had to come back to the town again, and that looks pretty healthy.
Mm-hmm.
How is the maintenance going? Because I know it's supposed to be regrouted every so many years so that we don't have to have failures.
To my knowledge, I could get back to you on the regrout schedule, but to my knowledge, it's in very, very good shape. Part of the revolving account, you know, we, in the facilities account, if you recall, there was a Netflix production done in early summer of '24 using the pool. Do you remember the name of what that was? It was with Nicole Kidman. What was it called? Had that really cool dance. But anyway, money that Netflix paid the school district for that filming scene that they did was put directly back. So you probably noticed shortly afterwards, cleaning out of the HVAC system, a lot brighter lights are in there right now if you go in there. So some other upgrades of that nature that were done.
I just want to follow back up on Nancy's question regarding any big ticket items. I was thinking of that when you were going through the strategic plan.
Mm-hmm.
And I would imagine there's milestones in the plan. And we're coming into year 2 of it.
Mm-hmm.
As we look at the budget, which is level service fund. Have we missed any milestones, or are we going to miss any milestones as a result of a flat budget?
So great question. So every year with the strategic plan, we write district action plans that kind of tackle different strategic initiatives that are in the plan. Actually, tomorrow evening, we'll do kind of a mid-progress report for the district action plans for 25-26. Really what we, for that particular strategic objective, we really focused in on, let's get this facility conditions assessment done, and then let's come up with a strategy, working with town boards, working with town officials, of how we move forward with the findings of the assessment.
Anyone else? Questions, thoughts? Go ahead, Bob. Oh, Jeff, go ahead.
Even Dr. I've been avoiding saying your last name because I'm not sure I'd ever get it correct, so I apologize for that.
You can call me Joe. It's Maruschek, but please call me Joe.
I just have a few questions, and as you mentioned earlier, I had the opportunity to go to the school committee meeting when the budget was presented to them, and as I mentioned, at that meeting, I was there as an individual, as a resident. Tonight, I'm here with my finance committee hat on, so my questions are a little different, though still focused on the budget itself. Just a few notes that I made going along here. So, when I think of budgeting, it's more than just, hey, what are the numbers for the next year and what are we going to spend and so forth. It has a lot of elements, and I compliment you and your team and what you've gone through tonight, because it does show that you do take those into consideration. The fact that you started with budget goals, I thought was very, very good, and they were comprehensive. It's one thing to do goals, but they appeared to cover everything. So having a set of goals is great. I was going to ask you some questions on your strategic plan, but they've been asked. But I do wanted to highlight a couple of things. The fact that you have measurements and that you have action plans that you review. It's so easy to do plans and just put them in a drawer and then dust them off the next time they have to be updated, but never paying attention in between. So it appears you're taking them into account when you're doing your budgeting, and that's very, very important so that we don't miss something. I would like to say that we're addressing this year's budget, but really we're setting the stone for next year's budget and the budget beyond based upon those actions and what we're doing. So that looks good. The bus contract, you mentioned that you're in year 2. Contracts are we talked earlier, a question was asked about risk, and contracts are always a risky item when they come due, because you're never sure what the environment will be like at that time and then which way they're going to go. But I don't know, and it didn't say on the slide, how many years is the bus contract? You're in year 2 of it now.
It's a 3-year contract with an option to roll it over for additional 2 years.
Okay, so you've still got another year and then possibly 2 after that, so that risk is very manageable right
Correct.
now. The other contract that, of course, I won't say of concern, but one we have to pay attention to, of course, is for personnel. You're in the 3rd year of a 3-year contract. When will that action start looking at that?
Great question. There is a provision in the current teacher's contract that says that the parties must reconvene by December 1st to commence negotiations. So I would not be shocked if at this time we are in negotiations next year. Realize before, let's say, the FY25 budget, during that process, what you generally do is you put in a placeholder as far as where you think you're going to come out in negotiations. And that becomes, kind of your planting your flag that, we can talk about year 2 and year 3. However, we've got some real defined parameters based upon budgeting for year 1.
Okay. As you go into it, and I'm not asking for any specifics.
Sure.
I wouldn't do that. But as you go into it, do you expect anything unusual? So what I mean by unusual is of course, benefits are important and pay is important and other things. But is there anything on the horizon that you think was not something the town has had to or the school district has had to deal with in the past that could affect next year's budget?
One of the things that it's not a huge driver, but the issue of paid family leave is something that has come up across all districts across the state. We increased what we are offering for educators that go out on, family leave to 2 weeks. Is it an enormous driver? No. However, there's costs associated with it. I would anticipate in negotiations there would be, further exploration of that based upon what some other districts have settled upon.
Great.
But when push comes to shove, it's about the cost of living adjustment.
Sure. Okay, thank you for that. No, that's a great insight to have. One area that's on, I think, everyone's mind in the news, and I'd like to understand where in your budget you've addressed this, what you think you need to do to go forward, and that's the area of security. It's a tough area. We wish, at least I wish, things were not the way they are, but you have to address it. You got to think security. You got to think about what if. We like to think sandwich, it will never happen. Well, it happens in lots of places. It'll never happen. So, can you just share with us, how does the budget take that into account? What are you doing to make sure that funds are available for, any security upgrades that need to be happened? Continue to keep an eye looking forward on security as we make improvements to buildings and so forth.
Sure. If you will recall, I think I came before this committee last August and kind of gave an update on a bunch of different issues. And a lot of it was around some of the capital investments that had been approved. If you recall, for this current fiscal year, one of the major capital investments was $275,000 for phase 2 of the upgrade of our security camera systems. Largely external security camera systems, so on the campuses of all 3 schools, really as an upgrade to the technology. All 3 schools also have external cameras that have license plate reading technology and so on. So that's a significant investment which is currently in place. We will also, part of our capital requests, we're still kind of refining, but we have a very, very solid district safety team which meets on a monthly basis. It is educators, administrators, our school resource officers, partners in public safety, also from the Sandwich Fire Department. And one of our emphases this year, in addition to our usual drill planning, is to look at some of the most current alert technologies that are out there. So, for example, thinking about all of our educators wear a lanyard with their ID badge, but also some of the technology where you could have a panic button on the ID badge. One solution that we're looking at that we feel very confident will be to have an alert system on all of the smart boards that are in classrooms, because every classroom across the district has a smart board. So not only to get physical messaging, but also strobe lights that are color-coded that deal with different emergencies. So I feel pretty confident that we are on top of these, thinking about structures that we've put in place to fortify our buildings, but also the human behavior element of what type of training do we need to do with staff and then in turn with students.
Thank you, appreciate that. And then my last question has to do in the area of facility, the buildings we have. So you will shortly get a report on the buildings and maintenance and improvements and maybe other areas in this report as you go forward. Before decisions are made, investments are made and so forth, have we ever taken a step back and said, gee, with the declining enrollment, and I know it's projected to be flat, but it could continue to fall or it could jump up, has what I call a break-even study ever been done? It says, this is the point where it doesn't make sense anymore to have 3 buildings. You know, if the tuition were to drop in half, probably then it makes sense. But is that number known? Has a study been done? And do we know what point it doesn't make sense anymore to have 3 buildings? As you showed earlier, you know, the class sizes are really favorable, they're good. The buildings allow that, the number of classrooms you have and so forth. But there's a point where the enrollment could get down to where you say, you know what, we can achieve that, but with 2 buildings. And there would be, you know, potentially significant savings that happen. Is that number known? And the reason we're asking is before we start investing in buildings, then all of a sudden hit that number and say, why did we
Sure.
spend that money?
Sure, yeah. Part of the facilities condition assessment takes into account room utilization rate. So take all 3 schools, and during the course of the day, at the elementary, different hours, and at the high school during different periods, what percentage of the rooms are actually being utilized? I think you would take a look at, you know, and right now it's in draft form. I think this isn't a difficult calculus, but you would take a look at, well, what would the enrollment be if you have 2 schools that have a sub 50% utilization rate? I can say with a high degree of comfort at all 3 schools, we're nowhere near that 50% mark. I would venture to say you're upwards in the high 80s, low 90s as far as room utilization rate. But that's something that we can definitely take a look at.
Thank you. Appreciate your time tonight.
Bob?
Thank you very much. I think this is terrific and very well organized, so thank you for that. Thank you to the team. Kudos on the transportation assessment. I'd love to get a copy.
Oh, I'll email you a copy.
I can't recall the last time someone in a town organization went out and contracted someone to take a look at saving money. So my hat's off to you and to the team. I
Easily
think
paid for itself.
I think it's extraordinary. Maybe just a couple of questions and one observation. And it's probably, you know, my school training that made me fall in love with footnotes, but I'll make a suggestion. You communicated earlier that salaries were moving at about 3%, give or take. But if you look through this document, there's a lot of salary lines that are moving significantly higher than 3%. Perhaps a footnote that just sort of explains why those numbers are significantly above the average would be helpful to
Sure,
you know, somebody like me.
actually, Jeff astutely asked that question, particularly with regard to the special education line, which I think is upwards of about 9%, and said,
Well, it's throughout the report.
Yeah.
So I think it's a good
And-
flag to call out.
short answer to that is a lot of those salaries are related to our paraprofessionals, you know, our aides that work with students with special needs. And, you know, in looking at what $1.50 or a $2 an hour raise is, and in some cases dropping a step, adding a new step, and so on, you know.
A lot of the dollars are small. I would acknowledge that. I'm just sort of pointing out. Then little nits, but nonetheless, if we use the tool that we've been encouraged to use, and I can't think of the name of it right now, the online budget tool where you go out and you find like communities,
DART. In education, it's called DART.
whatever that tool is, and I can send it to you later, the Cape and Islands towns don't come up as like communities. So it would be, I think it would be helpful for us to share information. Ed, go ahead.
No, I finish your thought.
Okay,
I'll
so
follow on.
I just think as long as we're being encouraged to go on a website and look at Massachusetts towns and communities as comparisons, I think it would be good for all of us to be on the same page and be using the same community.
We could easily get that data.
Let's, you know, these are all just sort of high-level reactions to
Sure.
this.
So on that point, just, and Bob, I'll come back to you. I did a little bit of ChatGPT around that very question, and looked at, for towns similar to us that had the issue of tuition assessments, pressure, similar teacher-to-student ratios, and similar tax burden as the town of Sandwich. So Pembroke, Situate, and Duxbury came up as three potential, and then it was, to me, it was odd, I guess, or why would they be South Shore towns? And it has nothing to do with the geographic presence. It has all to do with the parameters of who they are.
It's socioeconomics, demographics, and
Yeah,
so on.
so maybe those would be better, or additional towns to look at. I get why we want to look at Cape Towns as well, but I'm with Bob on looking for other
Yeah, we could
town
easily do a lot of
comparisons.
those same tables with what DESI considers to be DART districts or comparable
Yep,
districts.
great. Then I just want to, you've got a nice breakdown here of spending per dollar at the back of the document on page 31, highlighting insurance, retirement, and other benefits are almost 22% of a dollar spent on our schools. The insurance, retirement, and other benefits, that's not, and I know it's all the same pants, different pocket, but that's not your budget, that's the town budget, correct? Okay, so that leads me to the observation around page 7, positions funded through grants and revolving accounts. And I'm assuming the 62 positions we're funding through grants and revolving accounts are eligible for benefits and retirement?
In some cases, yes. In other cases, no.
Maybe we could break that out?
Absolutely.
Because it has a meaningful budget impact, I
Sure.
think, right? Those were the reactions. Utilities, I did have a question. And I may just not be remembering, did we do something with solar, or have we not done something with solar? Wasn't there a suggestion of doing solar up at the schools to defray costs?
I think Bud has a little better historical knowledge on that than I do.
I think roughly 5-6 years ago, we applied for, if I recall, it was 4 significant projects. The high school parking lot was the biggest one. Next biggest was the golf course parking lot, and then there were sections of the roofs on Oak Ridge and Forestdale. Continually go through that process, and then eventually Eversource let us know last year they would not be able to proceed with those. So they're dead in the water.
Okay. So I thought it was excellent. Very well done. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I, if it's okay?
Can I just ask a follow-up
Yeah.
on the solar? You said Eversource said they were dead in the water. Can you tell us what their reasoning was? I was thinking Spalding, and I don't know, Spalding, there are places in town that do have solar over their parking lots.
Yeah, Eversource doesn't have the infrastructure to support it. So they don't have the means to get us the energy or then to reuse it once we got it. They're many years away from having enough capacity on Cape for us to take advantage of that.
So to reword it my way, just to
Yeah.
reword it, they must have had capacity at one time, because there are locations in Sandwich that do have parking lots covered with solar.
I think a lot of those they funded on their own. It's cost prohibitive if we did it on our own. And then they were, for example, the amount that we'd make at the golf course was really minor. It would be great over 20 years, but it was pretty minor, and they wanted us to pay for upfront capital costs of over $600,000 to get the right level of service up there. But then they didn't even have the internal, capacity to support it. So we go through the Cape Light Compact and the Cape and Vineyard Electric Collaborative on all that, and so I think we went about it the right way. But they told us last year they're dead in the water. So
No, I'm sure you went about it the right way. I'm just,
yeah.
I was thinking Spalding has it, and I can understand Spalding's large, it might have the capital outlay, but then I was thinking there's a real estate over by, on Katua Road there, I think their parking lot, they
Those are different.
couldn't have had the,
Yeah, that's right. There is a small one on Couture.
yeah, they couldn't have had the capital, so somebody funded it, yeah. Thank you, appreciate that.
Dr. Marushek, you want to make a point?
Sure. I believe that the question that came in today was about where we are with respect to the 2022 debt exclusion, as far as how much funds is still left. What I am passing out is an accounting as of this last fall, after we concluded the HVAC project at Oak Ridge. As I discussed, I think we've got really a problem, a twofold problem. One, the original budget was, in my humble opinion, under budgeted before that 2022 debt exclusion. But then, if you recall where we were starting in the summer of 22, with inflation and construction costs spiking, we were in a situation where both the HVAC project at Forestdale and at Oak Ridge could not be done. So if you look at the pricing for the actual costs, and mind you, we went to bid 3 times on the HVAC project for Oak Ridge, the total cost was a little bit more than $4.5 million. Assuming the sinking fund of $750 is still applied to the school, we are left with a little bit more than $2.2 million. As we've discussed at the school committee level, the intent is this spring to go out to bid for boilers for both Forestdale and Oak Ridge. Our boilers at both schools are in the ballpark of about 20 years. So the mindset is, let's go out to bid. Let's get something that's a lot more energy efficient, which will hopefully impact our utility costs moving forward.
Thank you. Jackie?
Good evening. I see your picture there of the play that
Alice in Wonderland,
a great show. It was.
terrific job.
Last we met as a committee last week, and Bud reviewed the overall budget. One of the line items that really stood out with the schools was the tuition assessments.
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked about budget drivers, but we haven't really talked about that one. I just was kind of curious, first of all, how do you think about that line item and where it's going, and, relative to enrollments? How do you think about it?
I've got a lot of feelings about it, actually. I would say that there's a piece around, we're always going to have the element of choice. We're always going to have families that opt for parochial private school. That's never going to change. But I view things in the context of, what do we need to do to keep more of our students so that they have a sense of connection, a sense of belonging? And that's why you see kind of the tagline of our vision: belong, grow, lead. That's what we want for all of our students. With respect to your specific question, there's really, I view it in that 8 to 9 transition. There's 2 big buckets as far as the tuition line. There's the charter schools, and then there's the Voc Tech schools. I would say Sturgis, they had their expansion 10, 12 years ago, but that's been relatively stable. I would say Upper Cape Tech has had what I would refer to as enrollment creep, in the sense that it's gone larger and larger, in my humble opinion, without substantive conversation from the 5 sending communities about it. I got the word about 3 or 4 weeks ago that the lottery procedure was not used, and I believe the number was something like 319 students that applied were let in. And so, I had a email exchange with Roger, which was great. However, I said, well, this year you've got a freshman class of approximately 230. How many students did you let in? What did you have for the yield last year? So I've got concerns about that. If you look at the data of where the largest number of students that are not accessing a Sandwich Middle High School education comes from is Upper Cape Tech. And again, I think it's an outstanding school. I think they do a wonderful job for their mission. But like most things in life, I think there has to be a balance.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I hadn't really considered that there would be sort of a limit on that impacts, your enrollment. So that is an interesting area to explore. Are there other areas to explore? One thing that you've done here is you've created a strategic plan that I think, probably the school committee is largely supportive of, and those will yield some benefits in terms of helping parents in the community make the determination that Sandwich is the best place for their kids to go.
Sure.
And there could be other kinds of, I think, focused efforts. I was interested to hear you say that you have some action planning around strategic areas. And I'm wondering if this is not a potential strategic area. And one part of that action plan might be to negotiate further with tech and look at that. Although we don't want to limit families' choice. But there may be other things that we can do. Are we getting the message out? We have maybe more communication resources. We have, parents and, even the chamber and other ways that we can tell the story of Sandwich High School that would perhaps kind of stem that tide. I think what happens is, you sort of, I think a lot of the people in the community, as you said, come from the school and know how great the school is. But for some reason, we do have parents that are choosing to go elsewhere.
Absolutely.
And it would be really good to know why that is and to put together a set of actions that would stem that tide. I do think that, we can, if you're going to buy a van, that's great. And, people get a raise, that's cost of living, that's great. But this tuition assessment is really going to cost some money over time. Do you think that's worthy of the focused action committee that you might already have in place?
One of our district action plan areas for this spring, and I literally was working on it right before I came here, is the process of doing not only surveys, but also focus groups with families that look for other solutions. And I think, Jackie, it's a complicated mosaic. It's not just one thing. I mean, I've had the opportunity to do focus groups and to survey parents who've honestly said, hey, my husband owns a landscaping company. We've always known that, our son was going to go to Upper Cape Tech. So that's an element of it. But there's also an element of sometimes the decision is made actually even at the Oak Ridge School, even before it's time to think about what the options are 8th to 9th. And it could be for a whole host of reasons. Sometimes it is, hey, I've been with this same cohort of kids since kindergarten, and now it's about 150, 160 kids per cohort. I just want to try something new. I want a different group. Sometimes it can be, honestly, a negative experience that, you know, either with the child or with the family. So again, some of this does directly speak to school culture and what are we doing to foster that connection and that sense of belonging.
Yeah, and I think that the complicated picture is well, taken. It's really the folks who are not as well informed. So how do we sing the praisers of the school? In the report cards, you have, MCAS and SAT scores, better than the Massachusetts average. That's great. That's one of those kind of report card items. There are others. I've seen you present, percent going to college. I've seen you even present salary 5 years hence.
Yeah.
There may be other kinds of things that we can get the word out, so that when parents are making these choices, they have the information. That's really, I think, where, not to limit choice, but to have the information that would have them say, you know what, this is our best option. And it's one way to, I think, combat what looks like a line item that's going in the wrong direction.
Agreed.
Yeah. And one more comment on that is just, I did see the chart that shows the cost per pupil. I think that's also a function of some of this, so that if your costs are relatively stable and, you have some variable costs, but if a lot of your costs are stable and you're seeing any drop in enrollment, obviously
That's your denominator, sure.
That's going to really drive it forward. And we are seeing kind of a little bit of a hockey stick with now
Yeah.
over $26,000 a student. So I think it really hits us in, I think, a few different ways.
Agreed.
Good, thank you.
Go ahead, Nancy.
Joe, a few years ago, we talked about, there were state mandated tuition increases for special ed, and I know the school districts were trying to fight it, and, because it wasn't fair. Did we make any?
Spoiler alert, we lost.
Oh,
It was FY23 going into FY24. DESE and DOR mandated a 14% one lump sum. So we took that hit that year. That was a huge driver. However, it's been more reasonable. I believe it's for this year, the stated increase is about 4%.
okay, thanks.
Everything is relative, I guess, right?
Jim.
No, I actually just wanted to applaud Michelle and the school committee and yourself for the budget that you did present. I know every year we say, come under 3%, come under 3%, and there certainly is that. We talk about students, the stem of students leaving and whatnot. Maybe one reason they leave is because every year we just require a flat budget, a flat budget, a flat budget. Perhaps if you invested more into our schools, we could expand the music program, we could expand languages, we could give more opportunities. So I think it's, we have to be fair to the schools. We can't, on one hand, say, geez, you got to do something to stop these students. And on the other hand, say, but by the same token, we're going to keep you at a flat level, flat level, flat level. At some point, if you want to keep your students, you got to invest in your students. So I just wanted to applaud you and the team for the work that you have done.
Thank you.
There's been a couple of, Jeff, I'll come to you in a second. There's been a
just
couple of points made tonight that I think fit with what I've always hoped for after the end of the budget season, and we get into early summer, that perhaps the school committee, the finance committee, and the Board of Selectmen can get together to talk about planning items that are going to affect the next fiscal year. So just before you even get into next budget season, that we come together and begin some of that planning. And I think Jim just made a good point on that. Jeff made a point earlier about the contract and what you need to be thinking about and what the impacts of that will be as we think about how to plan. So I would just encourage us to be thinking about perhaps having a tri-board meeting for planning purposes over the summer months.
I think that's wise.
Jeff?
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to just make a follow-on comment to something Jim just said, and a few things I said earlier. And this had to do with why are kids choosing not to stay within the Sandwich school system. And just a piece of information, as you said earlier, it's a very complex question. It's not one thing. If we think we're just going to invest more in music or invest more in this, it's going to change the situation. I think we'll find it doesn't. I think that would be a mistake to think it's that simple. And the reason I say that is just one piece that I'm aware of. As alumni for college that I went to, I meet with kids periodically. They can request an alumni meeting, and it's part of the selection process going. And so I meet with kids at Sandwich High. I meet with kids from Sandwich who have chosen to go to Upper Cape Tech, going over to other charter schools and other schools and so forth. And the reasons you hear why they did that are they're very diverse. It's not like, oh, we just fixed this. And then there are many reasons. And some of it doesn't need to be fixed. Some of it, as you said, they've been with this group of kids for so many years, they just want to try something different. So there's you said that earlier, and I just wanted to reinforce that. It's not a simple fix. There's lots of pieces of information that you can come in to help, reinforce where we might want to address. Letting the MCAS know and school acceptance rates. And at the school committee meeting, you went over with the advanced credit and how the schools had done very well there and so forth. So there's lots of that information. But that's only some of the reasons that some of the kids leave. There's lots of other reasons that kids choose other schools. And when you talk about focus groups, I don't know how you would do this, but if you could figure out who in Greater Sandwich, like myself, meet with kids for reasons of college and so forth, they might be able to give you some insight as to what the kids tell us.
Our assistant superintendent, Dave Quinn, has started doing something that he calls food for thought lunches. So what he does is he springs for pizzas, and he will on a Friday afternoon meet with a core group of students and kind of talk about some key issues within the school. And he actually met with a group of 7th and 8th grade students. I want to say it was the second week of January, and they focused on this very topic of like, hey, where are you with regard to thinking about Upper Cape Tech or Sturgis and so on. And one of his largest takeaways was oftentimes that decision is made in 5th or 6th grade. It's not, here we are thinking, we've really got to take hold of our 8th graders and draw them in and kind of sell the middle high school. The die's probably already cast by the time they're in 8th grade.
If I may just follow on to that.
Go ahead, Jackie.
Just, but interesting. And so, maybe there is a moment in time where there is more focus around communications with parents and students. There is a little bit, maybe that's the moment. So, being really strategic about how, when and how folks get information at the right time to, again, make an informed choice. And that they fully understand. I think a lot of times kids are, they do what some of their peers are doing as
Absolutely.
well. So it's really important to get to the parents. And I think it would be, good for us in general to have that scorecard and communicate it out anyway.
Yep, agreed.
Anyone else? My last question goes back to the wireless access point. Forestdale wasn't on the list. So I'm wondering, is that something that we'll look forward to next year
Forestdale wasn't on the list for what?
for the wireless access points?
Oh, yes, I believe so.
So that'll be, and then I wonder if your new IT director has found any other gotchas as a result of kind of new set of eyes that,
To my knowledge, no. I actually, again, ironically enough, at tomorrow night's school committee meeting, Mike Falcone, our new IT director, will be giving kind of an update of what he's found. I've seen his presentation. No gotchas.
okay, great. Very good. Thank you again, Dr. Marushek, for being with us. As we continue our budget discussions over the next several weeks, there may be more questions that come up. I'll pass those along to you, and we look forward to seeing you again on Tuesday, March 10th, when we'll go through both the town and the school's fiscal 27 capital budgets.
Excellent. Thank you very
Thanks for your
much.
support and everybody's efforts. With that, the next item on the Finance Committee's agenda is to just discuss a planning item relative to the Capital Improvement Planning Committee. The Finance Committee has a representative on that committee, on the CIPC. Kevin Klein has been representing us for several years. His term will expire at the end of June of this year. So in anticipation of that, I just would ask you all to consider if you would be interested in representing the Finance Committee on the CIPC. My understanding from discussions with Kevin, it's not really a heavy lift. And if there's interest in serving on that, just to let myself or Bill know. Kevin or Bill, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
It is not a really heavy lift. We had a meeting yesterday for about an hour. We'll have one more meeting probably before the end of the budget season, and then we might meet once or twice during the year. It's a good group. They look at all of the capital requests and kind of look at planning the capital budget going forward. I've been on that committee for 7 years now, 3 or 4 of them as part of the CIPC, and then the last 3 as the Finance Committee's representative. It's available if somebody would like it.
So speak up, or you'll be nominated come our June meeting. There you go. With that, old business, anyone have any old business that I didn't anticipate? Bob, looks like you do.
I just, you know, and if this happened last week, forgive me for missing, but if we could talk a bit at a future meeting about the group health insurance, the county retirement assessment, and our unfunded OPEB liability. These numbers are staggering, and it just occurred to me as we were listening to a terrific presentation and talking about 3% or more than 3%, you look at the growth of these numbers, and it is, if it's not alarming, it's getting really close to alarming, and I think we should be dedicating some serious meeting time, in addition to meeting with departments, to this particular issue and what can be done about it.
We did talk a little bit about many of those line items last week, but we also have an opportunity come the middle of March for follow-ups to whatever we discover during the season. We can do that, and I'll get with Bill relative to any of those topics that we might want to squeeze in on the agenda even before then.
Ed, if I may, we have a night scheduled for March 3rd where we're going to be talking about wastewater, health insurance, and town human resources. So we do plan on talking about health insurance and OPEB quite a bit that evening.
Okay, perfect.
So if I may, just since we're going on health insurance and whatnot, and the school department is coming up to a strategy for negotiating with staff, it seems to me that employee contributions has to be on the table. So something to think about, you know, if we should be considering what the options are other than just sort of saying, well, that's how much it goes up. So I think we need to get, you know, not just numbers and people shrugging going, that sounds bad. I think we should hear what can we drive to make changes and what are the options.
Yeah, and to that point, that's why I see the need for that tri-board meeting where we can plan and raise these types of issues and bring them forth, assign them to somebody to work on ahead of the things that we know are in front of us. So, thank you. Any other old business? Nancy?
That's actually in the charter that we're supposed to have that meeting.
Yeah, the charter, though, as I understand it, still hasn't passed the legislature, but it is supposed to be in. It
Nice
is
to
a
be-
charter item.
Nice to be ahead of,
That was ahead, yeah. Go ahead.
I just mentioned a couple things that I thought came up. I didn't want to interrupt, but yeah, one thing on the charter though, like, I mean, this is a great example. Like Bill and I pretty much knew what that one-page budget summary was going to look like in October, November. And yeah, it's fine tuning, but you know, here we are in February and we're still waiting on 2 or 3 of the biggest numbers. So it always helps to talk in advance, but I think you guys know better than anyone. We don't get some of these final figures for the following year pretty late in the game. And then I also wanted to point out a couple things that I know we mentioned last week, but I thought it was worth saying again. Like, we haven't had an override need in 22 years. Basically, virtually unheard of. I know 1 or 2 towns that haven't during that period, but it's rare. And we're in really good shape, I think, for a couple more years where we don't have to worry about it. And I think it'll be interesting to see what happens on the South Shore and, you know, some of the bigger towns we mentioned last week that traditionally people always look to as being like super wealthy near Boston that are having troubles. And on Cape, I think we're going to see a lot of override requests in the next year or two, and I don't think we're going to have to worry about that, which is great. And then I just go back, and I know when the HR director, Marie Buckner, comes in, she'll highlight a lot of this. But this was years ago when Bob was chair. I think the committee had us do a 5-year basically survey of all town employees. And I think the thing that jumped out at me the most is, and I don't know if anyone else remembers, like more than 1/3 of our staff turns over every 5 years. So if you ask one of the reasons why are we asking for less than 3%, I'm sure some of that is turnover, you know, and there's people come in at different rates and savings here and there, but it is pretty interesting on how that actually plays out, you know, year to year. You know, and I think the question was, or the issue was brought up about when the school hired an outside consultant to help with the transportation study. You know, we did similar things with that regional emergency communications center that I know both chiefs are going to talk about at your next meeting after school vacation week. That will save us, you know, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that's only about 2-3 years away by the time it gets constructed and built and operational. And probably the best example, and Bill can give you the exact numbers, but you know, we hired an outside firm to look at our health insurance, and we left the Cape Municipal Health Group, I think 7 years ago, and that's the best thing we ever did in terms of cost avoidance and saving money and what we've been able to do compared to those. Not that anyone else left, but I don't think many of them have a choice because of where they're located. There aren't as many options. It's just Cape Cod Healthcare. So that's one of the things that was attractive to the other group that we were able to leave for. And that has certainly not saved us money, but it's certainly held down cost avoidance compared to what most others are looking at. And that's helped us a ton. And that's in the millions. That's not hundreds of thousands.
Kevin?
I know Dr. Marushek said they're negotiating with all of their departments next year. What's up with negotiations with the town?
We have approved contracts in place through FY28, so it would be for FY29.
Okay. And then the second question, and I'm not quite sure what it is, but the insurance. What is the employee contribution?
75, 25, 75 town, 25 employee
Thank you. And that's throughout the town.
throughout the town, yep.
Nancy?
Bud, could you update us on the status of the renovations in the building here?
Yes, so the contract was awarded, boy, I want to say late fall, early winter. Bids came in significantly less than we anticipated, which is great. Most of the expensive work in the building is replacing all the windows. And so where it sits now is they have to do mock-ups. There's 3 different types of windows in the building. So they have to do a mock-up that the architect will approve, and then those will start being manufactured off-site. And then in addition, there's a bunch of roof work, and especially the front of the building where there's rot and soft spots. And then ultimately, complete repaint, everything. So people won't see work on site probably for another 2 months. And then we're hopeful on the windows that as they come in, we'd only have to close down that area that's being worked on. We may have to close the entire building at certain times, but so far they're trying to avoid that. If we ever had to move a meeting, we'll give you plenty of notice, but I think by the time they actually do the physical work, most of our weekly stuff will be wrapped up by then. There will have to be scaffolding on the front. So I think that's safety-wise, that's what concerns us the most. If we try to keep the downstairs Arts Alliance open, I think evenings should be fine. So the contractor's working on a way to try to protect things and see if they can. They're trying to keep it open as much as they can. In a perfect world, I think by the letter of our contract with them, they have until late fall to complete the work. We did say, is there any way it could be done, by July 4th? And they haven't said no yet, so we'll see. So hopefully that goes quickly, but I think when it's done, we'll notice a big difference in here in terms of heat and other things. And especially the sort of the shell of the building will be solidified for a long time, so that's great.
Someone over there Jeff, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
The thing I was going to mention, Ed, was you mentioned the idea of a tri-board meeting sometime, in advance of, because we got these, I'll call risk items in future budgets and so forth. The other area we should consider is facilities. Both the school and the town. The school's going to get a report shortly. In fact, I think they have the draft and they're going to present it to the school committee. It would be good to have that presented to us and not wait till next year when we get into this cycle, because that's going to be too late to ask any questions and address any concerns and so forth. So that's one thing we should consider. Along that line, that could be expensive, and then we still have in front of us the new fire station and the new DPW. So there's big ticket items, and they will affect the budget differently, I understand that, but they're still big ticket items. They will take time to digest and to pursue as we go forward. I don't think we should wait to the end for those. Yeah. Especially that report that's going to come out that the schools are going to get. It would be good for them to present it to us sometime in the future after they've digested it. And you had asked for names going forward, and I understand we can't look at everything, but I had suggested to you that we have the director of facilities for the schools come in and speak with us, because I think that is a budget area that is something that's going to be in front of us, and we should start getting that under our wings sooner than later as we go forward.
He did come before us, I think, over the summer when we were approving the study. So he would probably be a good one to come and present that.
You had before we started this cycle, you had asked for names as you were setting the schedule up, and I had suggested to you that we have them come in as part of this process. And I'm not pointing fingers at anyone, but what happens is, and I don't know the details, we just got the numbers, but, there was that capital item for the schools. They had a list of things they were going to do. They're not going to get it all done. Prices are higher, bids are coming in, and, it's understandable, but it also creates issues, because now you got additional work that didn't get done, that has to get done, that has to get budgeted for, and you got other stuff already piling on. So You know, the potential's there for some very big ticket items, well in advance of sewers, which are many years out, but there are some facilities in front of us.
Jackie?
I just had a quick kind of like point of education. I don't, was a little surprised to hear that there is either a lack of or there was some kind of agreement about how much the sending schools can send to Upper Cape. I know that they usually do a lottery, this year did not. Is there governance around that? Is there any even handshake agreement about that?
Yeah, I think the only governing document is the enabling legislation that established Upper Cape Tech. And the big thing there is the formula on how each of the 5 towns gets assessed their number. So I think Roger goes through it every year, but on the capital portion, it's based on the K through 12 enrollment back in your hometown. And then the operating expenses go from your actual enrollment percentage at the school. So traditionally, our K through 12 enrollment locally is a bigger percentage than the percentage of sandwich kids at Upper Cape Tech. So we pay a bigger share of capital than operating, based on like how it was established. I can't remember when Upper Cape was established, like decades ago.
But even the number of students kind of thing.
Yeah.
The percent of, number of students or there's
Yeah,
no.
they would have to explain that. I don't,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm just curious.
I'll frame up a question for Superintendent Forget before he comes to visit with us.
Thank you.
So, go ahead, Jim.
Well, no, I think it does kind of go back to the idea, contrary of, not thinking it's a wise idea to invest in students. I think it is, and if you put money towards programs that are offered up at Upper Cape Tech, perhaps you could, stem the flow. I know when I went to public schools, those were a lot of programs offered in the public school system as well. And having been on school committee for a few terms and then watching it, you can see how programs get cut. And again, that's an example right there.
Jackie?
I just, I hear that so much, but just thinking outside the box too, as an alternative is what are the different schools good at? And double down on what is unique already. So not try to sort of beat everybody else at their own game, but really think about what makes Sandwich such a great school, and then really make sure that those are the things that get promoted rather than sort of bend over backwards to be a different school. And so, but I think all ideas on the table, but that's an idea that I would say,
Any other old business? Seems like there was some new business in there as well. Any new business? Seeing none, public comment, any public comment from Mr. Holden? No, thank you. Just to wrap things up, thanks again to Dr. Merschek and the school department for their efforts. Our next Finance Committee meeting is planned out for 2 weeks out on Tuesday, February 24th at 6 p.m. We'll be joined by the leaders of the police, fire, and DPW for their fiscal 27 budget discussion. If there are any focus areas or specific questions you want them to come prepared with, please send those along to Bill and I. Does anyone else have closing remarks?
Will they be giving us their presentations ahead of time for review?
Yeah, I'm not sure how much they're going to prepare, but if they do, I will definitely get those in advance. Yep.
Thank you.
We will get those out.
Very good. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Jackie motions, Nancy seconds. All in favor? Thank you all. Have a great evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Bill.